Hello there, how we all doing today? We're gonna do another special stream of Tales from the Tavern by Elven Maid Inns. We're gonna be reviewing it. This is gonna be part two. I wanted to go over a couple other things that looked kind of neat to me. Hope we're all ready and willing to go. I have a drink of my juice over here. Let me see here. Let's set the mood. Let's set this up. Okay, so what is it that we were going to go over? What was the last thing we went over? We last went over the guy talking about splitting the party. It was splitting the party. Story to keep to yourself, the real purpose of a backstory. Okay, we can go over that. Short story, interview with Sandy Peterson. We did that. This is the one. This is the last one we read. We've always split the party by Ryan David. Apparently, that's the guy from was it Nerd Cognito? Let's see. I want to go over from concept to class, turning inspiration into distinct TTRPG mechanics. That seems like a neat idea. So this is page 5. Shadow Dark RPG, old school danger for a modern audience. Also seems kind of interesting. Unleash your imagination. The forgotten art of dungeon mastering also seems like a good, neat idea. So we'll go with that for today. Unless there's something down here. B2 to keep on a Borderlands in my review. 5E's arcane suit stole my wizard soul. Elven rant. Mm, Orc legacy from Mordor to modernity. Eh. Oh, that's probably talking about the orcs and maybe let's go over that second. Talk about orcs and how it's perceived. Why alignment matters, your character compass. That is something that I think is important to talk about and how people right now in a zeitgeist just really, really hate on alignment. It seems to allegedly stifle people and how they think and play. So I want to go over that. So we got a good chunk. First, let's go over where'd it go? Start the party from concept. Let's go over from concept to class. Is that page 44? So that'd be page 45 in the PDF. Okay. From concept to class. Turning inspiration into distinct TTRPG mechanics. In tabletop role-playing game design, Many promising class concepts begin with strong thematic ideas but ultimately feel mechanically interchangeable once translated into rules. A summoner who calls forth powerful creatures and a puppeteer who controls animated constructs may seem worlds apart in flavor, yet at the core, both reduced to one character directing another in combat. This article examines a practical method for transforming raw inspiration into mechanically and thematically distinct classes by breaking concepts down to their fundamental mechanics, comparing them to existing archetypes, and then rebuilding them with clear functional differences. We can avoid creating redundant options while preserving the unique identity of each idea. To demonstrate this process, we will take two very different concepts, a summoner and a puppeteer, and explore how they can be developed into unique, balanced classes. Okay, I've actually created uh, a class for myself, and like the idea of differentiating itself, especially like a caster for fifth edition, is really tough to make it like different instead of just like, oh, why don't you just do this and just reflavor it. So this seems like a really interesting read, especially with uh, such like two very similar idea concepts. The first class idea came to me after seeing art of woman with white snake. My first idea came to me after seeing art of a woman with a white snake. It was an AI image that popped up in my feed, depicting a woman and a snake. It seems like she's controlling the creature, or perhaps the snake is protecting her for some reason. That sparked an idea in my mind of a class that would summon divine beasts and use them in combat. Now, a lot of you might think Final Fantasy, and yes, this is exactly the concept of Final Fantasy Summoner. I would be dishonest if I said they weren't related, as after the first idea came a chain of thoughts that led me to Final Fantasy as inspiration for what this class could do in combat. So, our first class that we'll try to build is a summoner, a caster who will summon divine beasts to use in combat. Class 2. My second thought occurred to me while watching anime, and here I must say that anime is an extremely good mine of ideas for TTRPG games, but that deserves a separate article. Yeah, yeah, anime is so unbound by, like traditional thought of like, oh, this and that, and it's probably because each story is different instead of using the same characters over and over and over and over and over for years, probably lifetimes now at this point, like Western like comic books. So they kind of have to. They're almost forced into doing different things, coming up with different concepts to stand out, or taking something that is the same and then like spinning it into something different, like a different idea of it. Uh, for TTR, there's a separate arc. The anime that inspired this class is called Hitori Bochi no Isekai. Yeah, Hitori Bochi no Isekai Koryaku. Loner Life in Another World. Such as a scene where the main hero uses a dummy skill that lets him control his body as if it were a puppet. This idea then ventured into another anime, Naruto, and the concept of puppet masters from that show. The concept was so intriguing that it could work as a TTRPG class. So we have two concepts that are extremely unique and different from each other, but are they really? In terms of theme, yes, both feel different enough from each other that they could potentially justify creating separate classes. The problem is that the thematic concept is only part of the equation. For a concept to be turned into an actual class, it not only needs to be it not only needs to feel thematically unique, but also mechanically true. So if the mechanics are, basically the same, it's it's it runs into you might as well just play this character and just reflavor it a little. So let's disassemble the concept to its purest basics. Summoner Object A summoner, controls Object B, summon in combat. Puppeteer Object A, puppeteer, controls Object B, puppet in combat. The basics are identical for both concepts. If we think about it, if we use the same logic for thief and fighter, we'll have similar situation. Fighter Object A, fighter, uses a melee weapon to attack enemies in close combat. Thief Object B, thief, uses a melee weapon to attack enemies in close combat. What sets the fighter and thief apart is how those basic concepts are expanded. A fighter will use strength-based weapons. A fighter will use strength-based weapons to attack, while a thief will use dexterity-based weapons. We have the same start, but move in different directions. The question is, can we do the same thing with Summoner and Puppeteer? Can we make Objects A feel different in combat as well as Object B behave differently based on those concepts? What's funny here is that a fighter, you can make a dex based fighter, and you can make a strength based thief. Like you can totally do that. Um, and in a fight would probably work the same. Uh, you usually only go strength and dex on these particular uh, classes for their out of combat stuff. Uh, the question is, can we do the same thing with Summoner and Puppeteer? Can we make Objects A feel different in combat as well as Object B having differently based on the behave differently based on those concepts? Let's see. It's not hard, right? We can just slap an existing class. Stop right there. Don't forget very important matter. Power control. At this point, we need to think about what system we're planning to use and what our action economy is. In 5e, we'll have action, bonus action, and reaction. But in Castles and Crusaders, we only have action. Those resources at our disposal make a huge difference in creating classes. Let's try using a Castle and Crusades for this article. Let's try using Castles and Crusades for this article. So our resources are movement and action. But we cannot use an action if we use more than 50% of our movement. Another thing that needs to be considered is if we're toying with dual character concept where a character has object A, player, and object B, summon slash puppet, are they two different entities in our combat? We need to consider is if our object B has a separate action economy, separate stats, and separate initiative. For this, for this is that for this is that for this we don't want to create a class that is much stronger than other classes. True, we don't want to have power creep. Um, Unfortunately, power creep is kind of it's really hard to like tamp down because the ideas start flowing, and then you're just like, oh, and then they can do this and that, and you're just like, whoa, this guy is super crazy. It's- to achieve that, we must ensure our classes fill specific roles in combat. The easiest way to think about it is in terms of the so-called Holy Trinity: tank, support, damage. This is crazy on how like the Holy Trinity and how much it on how pervasive it is in like gaming. Uh Especially when you're like thinking about like gaming with a team, like the idea of this Holy Trinity is a little excuse me, is a little crazy. Now, this is a very simplified explanation, and many times these terms are very flexible. This should not be needed for players. It's only for creators so that they can focus on the role of the class in combat. So let's put our objects A on the Holy Trinity chart. A summoner will be in the support area. The puppeteer sits somewhere between tank and DPS. Mm, I feel like a summoner could fill any of the roles of the tank support damage. Like both of these, depending on how you build it, could fill any of these roles in the Holy Trinity. Um, because it's just like just the matter of things. That what you can summon is infinite. You know the ideas you can figure out for that, and then like same thing with what you're puppeteering. Oh, I read this incorrectly, or I understood it incorrectly. They are putting them in those areas specifically. It's an active choice. I see. I see. I'm dumb. Time to separate the concepts. The summoner is summoning a guardian spirit, object B. The guardian spirit will have its own will and intelligence, hence its own personality. The puppeteer will use a doll or a puppet that will have no free will, so it will be more of an animated object. At this stage, our concepts separate from each other. The summoner will summon an independent creature that will have separate initiative. The puppeteer will control an animated object that will act as an extension of the puppeteer. That means the summoner will be able to use movement or action independently of the summoned beast, which will have its own action economy. But the puppeteer will need to use his own action to move and attack with the puppet. Our two concepts diverge into two different directions. Okay, I like that. I like that idea. Now, one concept feels vastly stronger than the other. Our summoner has a much bigger action economy than the puppeteer, so we'll now focus on building this class. True. That's what makes summoning so powerful in TTRPGs, is that you just literally just double the action economy of one character. Really powerful. In my concept, the summoner will be able to obtain different types of summons. Some will be more durable and act as tanks. Some will be stronger and act like melee damage dealers. Some will serve as casters and some will focus on healing. It feels so overpowered that we need to focus on limitations. One obvious limitation is that the summoner cannot summon more than one creature at a time. Another thing we need to take into consideration is resources. What will be consumed to summon the guardian spirit or celestial beast? We could create a hybrid system, allow the summoner to summon the same creature once per day, but when summoning again without rest, they must sacrifice HP to do so. This will put pressure on the summoner to try to make contracts with new guardian spirits over time. Interesting. So, the matter of resource concept is tackled. Another thing we need to tackle is action economy. Right now, players during one round have two actions and double movement as they control two separate characters, which is too much. The first thing we'll do is take control of the summon from the summoner. The summon will act independently based on a very clear template. Let's see what that template is. The game master will control the guardian spirit in a similar manner to monsters, but will have template in mind. A. Guardian spirit will protect the summoner, attacking anyone who attacks the summoner and focus its attention on protecting the summoner. B. Summoner's order takes priority over protecting the summoner. C. When the order is fulfilled, the guardian spirit goes back to protecting the summoner. Interesting. Guardian spirit will protect. You can override it, and then it goes back. Okay. Seems clear and simple for now. Oh no, we got a bot. Unfortunate. The summoner can use his action to give commands to the summon. Attack, defend, use skill, or others. Just keep in mind just keep in mind that the summon has its own mind. They can refuse to fill an order if forced to take action against their nature. Uh-oh. This becomes a little contentious at the table against nature, which is a big problem with alignment. Anyways, let's focus on the summoner now. The summoner will need an action to summon a guardian spirit and an action to give a command, but at this point, he can't do anything more. In Final Fantasy, summoners are often connected to white mages, so we might allow limited access to cleric spells with reduced spell slots. Mm, that seems a little rough, man. That seems a little rough. Because you're essentially taking the idea, well, if you give a command, which is an action, your next turn you can do different stuff, I suppose. Well, let's see. Summon Guardian Spirit and an action to give a command. Yeah. So your spirit goes and does a thing. I don't know, man. That seems a little tough because you're on your third round and you don't get to do anything. Feels bad, man. But I mean, I guess the whole point is to summon the thing, but at that point you might as well just be playing this thing that you're summoning. Let's see. Anyways, summons will have their own character sheets. Oh my god. I hate when that happens. Like the druid. Pre-made and scaled to the summoner's strength. We might introduce ways to reduce reckless behavior, such as a mind link where damage to the summon is shared with the summoner, or a trust reputation system between them. So a summoner feels quite unique at this point. We need to work on the details and play test it. On the other hand, we have a puppeteer, which feels much less complex. First of all, it's a range class that uses melee weapons at a distance. The puppeteer will use its action to move and attack with puppets. I think that's kind of a weird way to say it. I think you would say like, oh, move the puppets to attack with them or something like that. What I think here is a way for the players to build his own puppets or dolls, making them more durable, allowing them to use different weapons or even skills. A fun concept that we can explore is to have different types of puppets, maybe made out of corpses, or we could allow puppeteers and other players to join forces, enabling puppeteers to take control of players, giving them extra attacks or movement. There are a few things we could potentially explore here, but this article is quite long at this point, so it might be a good idea to focus on the details in future articles if there's interest in this. Um, that is a really, really neat idea to allow puppeteers to use uh other players, but that becomes very problematic very quickly. Uh, yeah, I can see how that can become very problematic. Just like enchantment magic, uh, pseudo lets you take control of other characters. That's that becomes very problematic very quickly if you have like the wrong person. And the problem with that is that a lot of people that are drawn to those types of characters are probably problematic to begin with. I know it's been said before, but boys and girls, there are worse things out there than necromancy. By stripping concepts down to their mechanical foundation and then deliberately rebuilding them with distinct roles, action economies, and thematic identities, we can turn similar sounding ideas into classes that generally feel different at the table. The summoner becomes a supportive commander of independent beings, while the puppeteer operates as controlling force whose power is directly tied to their own actions and resources. This methodical approach from idea to core mechanic to differentiate oh my gosh. This methodical approach from idea to core mechanic to differentiation and balance offers a reliable framework for any designer looking to expand their game's class roster without creating redundancy. Whether you're working in Castle and Crusades, 5e, or your own system, the key lies in making both the the key lies in making both the what and the how of each class feel unique. True, true. Um, okay, so they didn't go down to the nitty gritty, which is completely fine, and it's just kind of set up the idea of like just keeping classes different and not just being able to just go, oh, this class just for flavor it, into this or that, right? The summoner class is very notorious with that because you can just play a damn wizard and just use summons, at least from a fifth edition perspective, um, which is unfortunate. It feels like 5e summoners, I don't know. It's a neat idea. Anyways, I'm getting distracted. But the puppeteer is a much, much more interesting one where you could, per se, augment your puppet. That's a neat idea. Being able to augment your puppet into, doing this or that to fit the well, at that point you're just an artificer. Uh an artificer could do a puppeteer uh subclass. right? Because you already have like the gun and all that, the arcane gun that can walk around, and then you could also there's also the battlesmith that has like the pet. Yeah. Anyways, just some food for thought on that one. Let's go back up and let's go double check what else we wanted to read. There was other thing that I wanted to. Oh right, why alignment matters. Your character's compass in D&D 178, 176. No. Oh no, that did not work out well. Let's see here. 169. Tob's Marketplace of Masterwork Mechanic. Why alignment matters. Here we go. Okay. Why alignment matters. Your character's compass in D&D. I'm really, really interested in to see how they what they have to say about this. Or maybe it's just a general overview. I would like to dive into a cornerstone of Dungeons and Dragons, the alignment system. It's a topic that sparked countless debates, inspired epic character arcs, and shaped the moral landscapes of countless campaigns. Let's explore its history, its evolution, and what it should mean for you as a player or game master. The alignment system is one of D&D's most enduring mechanics, a framework for defining a character's moral and ethical stance. It's evolved dramatically since the game's inception, reflecting shifts in game design, storytelling, and cultural attitudes. Let's trace its journey. Okay, so we're only going through a brief history, so that's good. Original D&D. In the earliest days of D&D, alignment was a simple cosmetic framework inspired by the works of Michael Moorcock and Paul Anderson. Characters were aligned with one of three forces: law, chaos, or neutrality. There was no good or evil access. Alignment was about allegiance to universal principles rather than morality. Law represents Law represented order, structure, and civilization, while chaos embodied rebellion, freedom, and entropy. Neutrality was for those who avoided taking sides. This system was abstract, almost mythic, and tied closely to the game's wargaming roots. Monsters and characters were often locked into these alignments, e.g., elves were chaotic, dwarves lawful, and the system served as a shorthand for factional loyalty in a world of cosmic conflict. It wasn't about personal morality, but about where you stood on the grand struggle. Interesting, because I think 5e kind of went back to this sort of thing, if I remember right. We'll go over it, I'm sure. D&D Holmes Basic and BX. Interesting. The Holmes Basic set and Maldave Cook BX edition refined the system, keeping the law neutral chaos access but adding moral undertones. Law began to align with good behavior, cooperation, honor, protecting the weak, while chaos leaned towards selfishness or destruction. Neutrality remained a middle ground, often for those driven by personal goals over ideology. Alignment started to influence gameplay more directly. For example, certain magic items, like intelligent swords, could only be wielded by characters of specific alignments, and some spells had alignment-based effects. The system was still simple, but began to hint at the moral complexity to come. So this this one, the second one, kind of feels kind of bad because like you can be a bad person and still be lawful. They're just lawful under your law. Uh, right? We all know evil rulers and such as that. Um, so this one seems a little off kilter. Kind of glad that they didn't really stick with this one. It seemed very it seemed kind of intuitive at first, but then you start thinking about like broader concepts. And I'm surprised they came up with this in 81 when Star Wars around, right? Like the typical idea of lawful evil is Darth Vader. Anyways, I digress. Advanced Dungeons and Dragons under Gary Gygax introduced the iconic nine alignment grid we know today, combining the law chaos access with the good evil access. This created alignments like lawful good, chaotic evil, true neutral. So they just went down. They just went like just diagonal. Just drew a line. Okay. Each alignment came with a detailed description outlining its philosophy and typical behaviors. This system was deeply tied to the game's mechanics and lore. Paladins, for instance, had to be lawful good, and any deviation, like committing an evil act, could strip them of their powers permanently. Clerics were bound to alignments compatible with their deities, and even magic items often had alignment restrictions. The nine alignment grid wasn't just flavor, it was a core mechanic that shaped character identity and consequences. AD&D's alignments were also steeped in a worldview of absolute morality. Good and evil weren't relative. They were cosmic forces. Demons were chaotic evil, angels lawful good, and the multiverse was a battleground for those ideals. This reflected the era's storytelling, where heroes fought clear-cut villains in a struggle of light versus darkness. The BECMI Basic Expert Companion Master Immortal Edition, edited by Frank Mentzer, stuck with the law neutral chaos axis for its basic and expert sets, however. Let's see. Stuck with the law neutral chaos axis for basic and expert sets, keeping things simple for new players. Oh, okay. However, it acknowledged the nine alignment system in later supplements, especially as characters ascended to epic levels. BECMI emphasized alignment as a guide for roleplay, encouraging players to think about their characters' motivations and loyalties, though it remained less restrictive than AD&D. Interesting. What Sea Era 3rd edition, 2000 2008. Wizards of the Coast took over D&D. The nine alignment grid remained, but its role shifted. 3rd edition, 3E, loosened alignment restrictions, reflecting a growing emphasis on player freedom and narrative flexibility. Paladins still needed to be lawful good, but the consequences for straying were less severe. Temporary loss of powers rather than permanent exile. Classes like clerics and druids had more alignment flexibility, and the system felt less like a cosmic mandate and more like a personal choice. 3E also introduced the Book of Vile Darkness and Book of Exalted Deeds, which explored the extremes of evil and good alignment in detail. These books reinforced the idea that alignments were moral archetypes, but they also acknowledged moral grayness, with complex villains and flawed heroes becoming more common. Fourth edition streamlined alignments to reflect a more modern relativistic worldview. The nine alignment grid was replaced with a simplified system: lawful good, good, unaligned, evil, and chaotic evil. This change de-emphasized the law chaos axis and focused on morality as a spectrum. Unaligned became the default for most characters, representing those who didn't adhere to strict moral codes. I think this is what I was thinking of, this portion, right? Um, and that became problematic in the exact opposite direction because it's just like, oh, well, I am not completely lawful good, so I might be good, but most people just tend to be unaligned because, sometimes you have to kill somebody, and that's not necessarily the, most morally good thing in the world. Oftentimes, D&D, you are just killing people, right? So it turned into this like weird conundrum of just being unaligned, where you could probably be good. Um, it made everything so bland in like the idea of morality. Like having these systems, or even like putting them in, starts to build into like, even subconsciously, into like characters and go, oh well, my character do this. Probably wouldn't care. So then they all just became just a blob of morality instead of like, you know, a salad of morality, shall we say, right? It even says so here. Unaligned became the default for most characters, representing those who didn't adhere to strict moral codes. Uh, so let's get back into it. 4E's alignment system was less restrictive, with 4E's alignment was less restrictive with fewer mechanical consequences. Paladins, for example, could serve any deity and weren't bound to lawful good. This shift aligned with 4E's focus on tactical combat and streamlined rules, but it frustrated some fans who felt alignments had lost their depth and narrative weight. I was actually kind of one of those people. But you got to remember, in like the 2000s, there was this idea of like, oh, well, it becomes problematic, which it did because of such strict adherence, especially for paladins and clerics, in that you had to act a certain way, or even rogues. Well, they would still do that, but rogues had to act a certain way because of, you have to act a certain way due to your alignment, and especially for the more divine classes, if you wander from that, it becomes like, um, well, my character will have to knock out the rogue because stealing is bad, and it became a problem. It was a problem for obviously decades, which is why they moved away from it. The people were afraid of it now, right? You had a paladin, and you're just like, you're like, and then over the table was all like, oh well, you're just gonna have to knock out my paladin in order to do this thing that's needed to be done. And then you were down one player, and the player was just sitting there like, okay, and it made playing paladin feel bad. Uh, anyways, fifth edition, 2014 to present. Fifth edition returned to the nine alignment grid, striking a balance between tradition and flexibility. Alignments are now described as guidelines rather than rigid rules, with player's handbook emphasizing that their starting point for character development, not a straitjacket. Mechanic Mechanical ties to alignment are minimal. Spells like detect good and evil on creature types. Spells like mm, focus on creature types, e.g., fiends, celestials, rather than moral alignment, and classes like paladin have no alignment restrictions. This, what they did for fifth edition, was a really good idea, right? You can be an evil paladin, a la Darth Vader again. Um, 5e's approach reflects modern storytelling trends where moral ambiguity is celebrated. The game encourages players to explore their characters' motivations, flaws, and growth with alignment as a loose framework rather than a cosmic mandate. However, this flexibility has led some to argue that alignment feels vestigial, overshadowed by role-play and character backstories. Um, yes, and I think it comes from this idea of being trapped by morality, uh, for better or for worse. Whether it's from older players being scarred by, third edition, second edition, or, the first, um, or, children thinking in like black and white ideas, not being able to understand, complexity. The idea of lack of rigidity is complex. Let's see here. What alignment should represent in your game? Alignments are more than a box to check on your character sheet. They're a moral compass, a lens through which you view your character's choices and growth. Unfortunately, alignment is often sidelined in modern D&D, dismissed as restrictive or overshadowed by the mantra of just roleplay. But this misses the point. Alignment doesn't dictate our behavior. Your behavior dictates your alignment. It's a dynamic, evolving reflection of your character's moral journey, not a static label. At its core, alignment represents the boundaries of what your character believes is right or acceptable. It's shaped by their upbringing, experiences, and goals. A lawful good character might believe in upholding justice and protecting the innocent, while chaotic neutral one prioritizes personal freedom and self interest. These aren't rules you must obey, but guidelines that help you stay true to your character's worldview. True. Ugh, chaotic neutral characters are just like, in my opinion, the worst. They're either like just assholes who are just very self-interest, or they're just people that just go, "Oh, I don't care." And it's like, okay, then why are you here? Why are you playing this game? That is so weird. I'm not a fan of chaotic neutral characters. When creating a character, take time to define their morality. Ask, why were they raised? Did they grow up in a strict, honorable household or a cutthroat survivalist environment? What have they experienced? Exposure to death, poverty, or corruption can shape their view of right and wrong. What are their goals? Are they driven by revenge, redemption, or ambition? What are they willing to sacrifice to achieve those goals? This part is the defining part of morality. What are they willing to sacrifice to achieve those goals? I think that has to be it. That has to be the defining moment of what the morality is. These questions will point you toward an alignment that fits your character. From there, role play with intention. Letting their actions reflect moral compass. but don't treat alignment as immutable characters. Uh, but don't treat alignment as immutable. Characters evolve. A lawful good hero who compromises his principles to save a loved one might slide toward neutral good, haunted by their choice. A chaotic neutral rogue who finds purpose in a cause might inch toward chaotic good. Alignment should shift with your character's arc, reflecting their growth and descent. Yeah, yeah, I that is true, right? And to put it mechanical, to put it into like a mechanical flavor as far as fifth edition is concerned, um, different gods can start favoring you more and less. So, like, if you believe in a god and then you start drawing one way or another, that god will start losing favor less and less. Like, God's gifts to you will lessen, and other gods will start looking into you, especially like a slow fall. Doesn't even have to be a paladin. And in older editions, alignment was a challenge to embrace, not a restriction to resent. Take the AD&D paladin who had to be lawful good and faced dire consequences for straying. Modern players might see this as limiting, but for many, it was a thrilling test of integrity. Staying true to a paladin's ideals in a morally complex world required creativity and commitment. A single evil act could cost them everything, forcing players to weigh their choices carefully. This made alignment a storytelling tool, not a punishment. Contrast this with modern D&D, where alignment has little mechanical weight. Classes like paladins are free from alignment restrictions, and moral consequences are left to the GM's discretion. While this offers freedom, it can dilute the stakes. Alignment should challenge players to embody their character's values, even when it's hard. A lawful good character who sacrifices an innocent to save others should feel the weight of that choice, not just in roleplay, but how it shifts their alignment and worldview. Um, to me, I think that, especially for Paladin, you should start like losing capabilities unless you've fully fallen for a little bit, like a some sort of mechanic to go, okay, well, you lost the ability to do something really small. You start losing the ability, and then like you start falling. That'd be kind of neat. Like if you are a lawful good character and you do something like out of pocket of like just not caring to save an innocent, even when you definitely could, there needs to be some sort of punishment. Like it's baked into the class. And this idea where people are like mad about that nowadays, that feels bad. That takes away from the difficulty of the storytelling, right? You know, playing video games that are difficult, it's part of that enjoyment. And it feels like it's taken away from it. Alignment's evolution mirrors a broader cultural shift in storytelling. Early D&D was rooted in a binary worldview, good versus evil, light versus darkness. Villains were often irredeemably evil, think Orcus or Vecna, while heroes were noble champions. Monsters like goblins or gnolls were born evil, the alignments fixed by their nature. This reflected the era's entertainment, from Tolkien's orcs to comic book supervillains. Today, D&D embraces moral ambiguity. Villains must have motives, backstories, and redeemable qualities. Monsters like goblins and orcs are no longer inherently evil, but products of the environment, capable of change. Even fiends like gnolls, once the epitome of chaotic evil, are given nuanced lore in 5e, with some sources suggesting they're driven by demonic influence rather than innate malice. The shift aligns with modern storytelling, where heroes are flawed, villains are relatable, morality is a spectrum of gray. While this can make for richer narratives, it can undermine alignment's purpose. If everything is gray, what does it mean to be lawful good or chaotic evil? Alignment's Alignment thrives when it offers clear archetypes to embrace or subvert. A chaotic evil villain who's just misunderstood risks diluting the stakes, while lawful good heroes with no moral anchor feels aimless. As a player, don't shy away from bold alignments. Lean into them and let your character's journey add the nuance. When you create a character, use alignment to ground their identity. A true neutral druid might prioritize balance, avoiding extremes of good or evil. A chaotic evil warlock might revel in destruction, but their actions should reflect a consistent worldview, not random villainy. Roleplay with purpose, letting your character alignment guide their reactions to the world. Yeah. For example, consider a lawful. Well, we had a couple of examples already. For example, consider a lawful good fighter raised in a temple devoted to protecting the weak. When faced with a bandit threatening a village, they might seek to subdue rather than kill, hoping to reform the bandit. But if the bandit kills an innocent, the fighter's faith might be tested. Do they execute the bandit, risking a slide toward neutral good, or uphold their ideals despite the cost? These choices make alignment a living part of your character's backstory. As a game master, alignment is your ally in crafting meaningful consequences. Don't be afraid to challenge players when their actions clash with their alignment, not out of malice, but to deepen the story. A lawful good cleric who sacrifices an ally for the greater good might face nightmares, guilt, or divine disapproval. Mechanically, you could rule that they don't gain the benefits of a long rest due to their troubled conscience, as their alignment shifts towards neutral good. This isn't punishment, it's an opportunity for growth. Yeah, I like this. I don't like this. It's an opportunity for growth. That's like your boss saying uh, that you messed up, but don't worry. It's an opportunity for growth. You can fix this. Consider the context, though. A punishment like Sleepless Nights works in favor of a safe tavern, where it adds roleplay flavor when not a deadly dungeon, where it could derail the game. Use alignment shifts to spark character development. If a chaotic neutral rogue starts acting selflessly, nudge them towards chaotic good and explore how they grapple with their newfound morality. Thought just came into my mind. Give them the sleepless nights. Like, how could I do something so good? What is wrong with me? I should have just slit that dude's throat and just walked off. Okay, anyways. If a neutral evil wizard shows remorse, let them inch toward neutral, facing tensions with their darker past. Alignment can also shape your world. A lawful good kingdom might enforce strict justice, clashing with chaotic players. A chaotic evil cult could test the party's moral limits, forcing them to confront what they're willing to do to stop it. Use alignment to create stakes, not to judge players. Alignment isn't about restricting roleplay. It's about enhancing it. It gives your character a moral foundation, a starting point for their journey. As a player, embrace the challenge of staying true to your alignment, even when the world tempts you to stray. As a GM, use alignment to craft consequences that make choices matter. Whether you're fighting for light, reveling in darkness, or navigating the gray, alignment is a tool. Oh, or navigating in the gray. Alignment is a tool to make your D&D experience richer and more meaningful. So next time you roll up a character or plan a campaign, don't gloss over that alignment box. Ask yourself, what does my character stand for? Let alignment guide you, challenge you, and evolve with you. Your story will be all the better for it. True. True. I really wish that right now the D&D community wasn't as afraid of alignment. It might just be the TTRPG community as a whole, but seems to be like this whole thing of being against alignment, just being so afraid of it as either restricting or well, it is just too restrictive or seen such because it is. It is restricting like your ideas. It is restricting your character from just acting like super crazy, like out of what they would do, and it forces the GM, well, forces the DM because it's D&D in this matter, to come up with like consequences. Uh yeah, it's like one thing I think of is like let's say you have a bard and they're constantly, enchanting people, lying, this and that and the other. That is, and they're chaotic good, right? They're like, oh, I'm doing it for the forces of good. Well, just like in my campaign, I have someone who kind of does that, and then now they have a Lolth over their shoulder, giving them different ideas whispering to in their ears. And then they kind of gave their souls to Lolth at this point, and now they're Bardic Warlock. Seems interesting. Do we want to watch? Do we want to read this one? Grim Fantasy, building a world without light. Um, I think we can go over this. Seems like an interesting idea. Yeah, yeah. Let's see if we can build a world without light, or how do we go about doing it? Fantasy, as a genre, is a vast and varied tapestry. We have a heroic fantasy, where a courageous protagonist embarks on quests, battles evil, and overcomes personal or external challenges, emphasizing virtues like honor and triumph. Then there's high fantasy with its epic stakes, think saving the world from a dark lord or an apocalyptic force. Other genres like mythic fantasy, urban fantasy, sword and sorcery, uh, and dark fantasy, each bringing their own flavor to the table. Among these, grim dark fantasy stands out as a darker, morally ambiguous subgenre where heroes are flawed, the world is brutal, and cynicism often reigns supreme. You might be thinking, Emmy, you always emphasize the importance of the battle between good and evil in fantasy. And you're absolutely right. That's been my stance. I've always believed there's no light without darkness, no shadow without light. But today I want to challenge that notion, not by abandoning it, but by exploring how a world steeped in darkness can make even the smallest flicker of light feel monumental. After all, as the saying goes, a candle burns brightest in the dark. In many TTRPG sessions, I've heard stories of players leaning into morally grave choices, even when the game master envisions a classic tale of heroic champions saving the world. This tension between player agency and narrative intent can create fascinating dynamics. It's a wonderful optical illusion that illustrates this perfectly. A gray square on a white background appears dark, but the same gray square on a black background looks almost white. Context shapes perception. Similarly, a moral questionable act, like theft or violence, can appear heroic or villainous depending on the circumstances. I mean, it's a circle, but it still stands. Take Robin Hood, for example. He's a thief who robs rich and attacks law enforcers. Yet, we celebrate him as a hero because he fights against systemic corruption and uplifts the downtrodden. His actions, viewed in isolation, might seem criminal, but in context of a world ruled by greed and oppression, they shine as acts of rebellion and hope. This principle is at the heart of grand fantasy, facing characters who make questionable choices in a world so dark and morally corrupted that their actions become a beacon of light. Let me introduce you to my homebrew world, a setting designed to embody this philosophy. In this grim fantasy world, the ruling class is a secretive cabal of vampires who hide their true nature from the common folk. These bloodthirsty aristocrats manipulate society from their shadows, pulling strings to maintain their power. The goddess of darkness, a malevolent deity, masquerades as her benevolent sister, the goddess of light, deceiving the masses into worshipping her. This false hope keeps the people docile, clinging to a lie that sustains their suffering. The Church of Light, which should be a bastion of virtue, is a hollow institution corrupted by greed and lies. It serves as a tool for vampires and the goddess of darkness, enforcing their will through fear and violence. The church's enforcers, cloaked in the guise of justice, roam the land hunting witches and mutants, terms used to dehumanize anyone who deviates from the norm. Descendants of ancient crusaders who slew the dragon god, a once revered deity whose death left the world spiritually and physically broken. Let's see here. Descendants of ancient crusaders who slew the dragon god, a once revered deity who left the world spiritually and physically broken. That's kind of worded weird. Let's see here. Descendants. So there are people who are descended from the crusaders. They slew a dragon. They revered the deity, and this is the part that's kind of weird. After they slayed the dragon, did it leave death? Whose death? Okay, so they slayed a good dragon, and it left the world broken. Gotcha. Now these enforcers treat humans like lab rats. No, that means so the deity was bad because it left the spirit left the world spiritually empty and broken. So then they killed it because now these enforcers treat humans like lab rats, harvesting their blood to fuel grotesque technological advancements that benefit only the elite. Okay, so the dragon was bad. Humanity itself is no bastion of morality. Children born with lycanthropy like curse, manifesting as rat folk, fox folk, wolf folk, cat folk, and other hybrid forms are shunned, abandoned, or killed on sight. Those who survive are forced to live in squalor, hiding in sewers and slums, scraping by in a world that despises them. The sky above is perpetually shrouded in dark, rain-soaked clouds that block the sun, casting the world in eternal twilight. This is a world without light, a world of lies, a world suffocated by despair. Why create such a bleak setting? Because in a world of this dark, let's see here. Because in a world this dark, the player become the hope. The world is intentionally designed to make hope feel scarce, almost unattainable. Everywhere the players look, they encounter evil, corruption, and despair. The vampire's tyranny, the church's hypocrisy, the enforcer's brutality, and humanity's prejudice create a suffocating atmosphere. Yet, it's precisely this darkness that makes the player's actions, however flawed or morally ambiguous, shine like a beacon. In this grim fantasy world, the players are traditional heroes clad in shining armor. Ah, the players aren't trad heroes. They might be a rogue who steals to survive, a warrior with a blood-soaked past, or a cursed outcast seeking redemption. Their methods may be questionable, but in a world where the ruling class feeds on the weak and the church betrays its flock, even small acts of defiance, like protecting a cursed child or exposing a vampire's true nature, become heroic. The players are the candle in the dark, the choices, the spark that could ignite change. I won't pretend this concept is entirely original. The classic TTRPG setting, Dark Sun, was a massive inspiration for my world. Dark Sun, set on the dying world of Athos, is a brutal post-apocalyptic fantasy realm filled with slavery, environmental collapse, and a tyrannical sorcerer kings. Hope is scarce and survival is a daily struggle. Yet, it's the very bleakness that makes the player's actions feel so impactful. In Dark Sun, players aren't just adventurers, they're potential survivors, rebels who can challenge the status quo and bring light to a world that has forgotten it. Oh man, I forgot all about Dark Sun. I kind of want to go into like what Dark Sun is. Like I should look into that. Like I know this about Dark Sun, and I know that like people think it's super problematic also. My grim fantasy world follows a similar philosophy but leans even harder into moral ambiguity and systemic corruption. Where Dark Sun uses environmental desolation. Duck Sun. It was just a giant celestial duck, and it just goes quack in the morning and goes quack at night. Where Dark Sun uses environmental desolation to create its tone, my world uses social and spiritual decay. The vampires, the false gods, and the corrupted church create a web of lies that the players must unravel. Every choice they make, whether to trust a seemingly kind priest, to spare an enforcer who claims to be just following orders, or to or to an ally with the cursed outcast carries weight. Or to ally with the cursed outcast carries weight. Okay. The world is designed to test the morality, forcing them to decide what it means to be a hero in a place where heroism is almost extinct. This approach to world building is incredibly versatile. In a TTRPG, the GM can use the setting's darkness to challenge players' assumptions and encourage creative problem solving. Players might start as mercenaries or outcasts, but as they overcome the world's secret, say the vampire's hidden rule of the goddess's deception, vampire's hidden rule or the goddess's deception, they're drawn into a larger struggle. The GM can craft scenarios where every choice feels like a moral dilemma. Do you kill the enforcer who's hunting a witch, knowing he has a family? Do you expose a church's corruption, risking a riot that could harm innocents? The darkness of the world amplifies the stakes, making every victory feel hard won. What is going on here? For fantasy novels, this setting provides a rich backdrop for character driven stories. protagonists in this world might be a cursed rat folk seeking to overthrow the vampires, or a disillusioned enforcer who discovers the church's lies. Moral ambiguity allows for complex character arcs. Heroes who make mistakes, villains who believe they're justified, and everything in between. The ever present darkness creates tension, while the faint glimmer of hope keeps readers invested in the character struggles. In traditional fantasy world, the battle between good and evil provides balance and structure, but in a grim fantasy world, the absence of light makes every spark of hope feel revolutionary. By placing players or characters in a world of lies, corruption, and despair, you create opportunities for them to define what heroism means, whether they're stealing from the rich to feed the poor, defying a tyrannical church, or simply surviving in a world that wants them dead. Their actions become a testament to the enduring power of hope. So, whether you're GM crafting TTRPGs or TTRPG campaign, or writer dreaming up a novel, consider embracing the shadows. Build a world where darkness reigns and let your players or characters be the light. After all, a candle burns brightest in the dark. Oh, this is this is an actual advertisement. Raven Mulligan thinks herself a rebel. Her attendance at college is often interrupted by treks into the mountains near her home. Her parents' disappointment only strengthens her resolve. But when she ventures out to the logging camp early one morning, she comes face to face with a monster she never imagined might really exist. A monster with the face of a man and a thirst for her blood. But monsters are not the only thing lurking in the Ruby Woods. When a well-dressed stranger emerges from the trees and promises to save her life, he leaves her with a single overwhelming desire. Am I old enough to be reading this part? Broken Wing is a dark, modern fantasy novel set in rural South. Learn more about Broken Wings at bridgerjames.com. Okay. Oh, another another recipe. I love these recipes. I love the start of these recipes. They're so neat. Absolutely love these. A pale, silver-tongued stranger arrived one night during a storm. He spoke little of where he came from, but he paid for his lodging with this recipe, saying it was the only kiss worth remembering. The drink is seductive, tart, and carries a dangerous sweetness. We serve it now to those who enjoy a little mystery with their evenings. The Vampire's Kiss. A bold, tart, and slightly sweet cocktail with a deep red color and a dangerously Moorish quality. So, 45 mils of vodka. That's it. How many milliliters are in an ounce? I gotta look this up. How many milliliters in an ounce? So 29 and a half basically. So 30, basically 30 mils is an ounce. So that's 45. So that's an ounce and a quarter. This is 1 ounce. A quarter ounce of Chambord and a quarter ounce of lime juice. That's a really small drink. Like you could probably put that in like a one of those like tall glasses, like those really thin tall glasses. I forget what they're called. Fill a cocktail shaker with ice. Add vodka, cran, Chambord, grenadine. Oh, does it call for grenadine or grenadine? You could probably. Uh, I wonder if the grenadine, if you added it also, instead of doing or, you could probably do an and, but the grenadine might overtake the Chambord. Yeah, the grenadine might overtake the Chambord. And you shake really well, straight into a martini glass or a cope. Oh, that's why. It's a small drink. Duh. And then you garnish it with a lime. Serve chilled, the color and flavor make it a favorite for dramatic entrances and moonlit conversations. Where does she get these? Like, where does she get these recipes? Like, that's so cool. This must be a little short story. These stories are so long. The Inn of Infinite Worlds. System agnostic respite for adventurers who just need a magical inn to restore their spirits. What is this? I don't know what that is. Download through paid tier at this stuff if you're interested. Uh, is this? Oh, neat. This seems really annoying though. If it becomes like a day, like thing like on this day you get these powers and just like okay, well I'm useless now. Um, Orc Legacy. We'll keep that in mind. What's 193? We'll go back up to the contents. What's one more thing that we can do here? That what's one more thing that we want to read? Kind of wanted to read about the orcs. Uh, Alignment Matters, Vampire's Kiss. Oh, I wanted to read about the backstory thing. Where was that? Uh, Video game crossword, fantasy, take ground, keeping free from the modern chaos. Kind of also wanted to read that. Dryad's Blood. That's funny as shit. It's just, where was that? Stop telling stories. Dryad's Blood, blah, blah, blah. 5E's Arcane, Stole My Wizard's Soul. Elven Rant. Double Standards. Cultural Gatekeeping. I don't know what Gatekeeper RPG. Uh-oh. Now I'm completely lost. Where was Arc Legacy, Journey Through the Worlds, Grim Fantasy? I think we should read this. I think this is more important, right, than the idea of like the orcs and like their history and how we see them. 170. So it'd probably be 171. Whoops. Okay, so this will probably be the last this will probably be the last one for the day, because I still want to leave. I don't want to give everything away, right? This, as you saw, this magazine is huge. So yeah, this is the two parts, and it's just there's still so much to go over. I really really enjoy this. I highly recommend this. Um, I wonder if I can pre-order. I'm probably gonna see if I can pre-order it today. If not, like buy it on release or something. Because I wanted to buy the first two, when certain things came up, and finances didn't allow me. But I definitely want, like, now that I have this, I definitely want to buy this. Maybe if I can get my hands on the first two also. It's really good. I'm really surprised. Fantasy's sacred ground, keeping fantasy free from the modern chaos. So let's see how in depth they get. I wonder how political they'll get on this. Fantasy fiction is a realm of boundless imagination. It's sanctuary where dragons soar, heroes forge their destinies, and worlds unfold in ways that transcend the constraints of our everyday reality. Its enduring power lies in its ability to transport readers to places where universal truths are explored through myth, allegory, and echoes of history. At its finest, fantasy offers an escape from the mundane, a lens for reflection, and a spark for wonder. Yet, in recent years, a troubling trend has emerged: the infusion of contemporary real-life politics into fantasy narratives. The encroachment threatens to dilute the genre's timeless essence, alienate its diverse readership, and tether stories to the fleeting controversies of the present. Instead, fantasy fiction should draw its inspiration from historical movements and events, which provide a universal and enduring foundation for storytelling that resonates across generations. As C.S. Lewis eloquently stated, literature adds to reality. It does not simply describe it. It enriches the necessary competencies that daily life requires and provides. And in this respect, it interrogates the deserts that our lives have already become. An experiment in criticism, 1961. To reverse this, to preserve this enrichment, fantasy must remain a refuge from diverseness of modern politics, rooted instead in the timeless currents of history. The damage of contemporary politics in fantasy fiction. Mm, I feel this is like a title, like it's this section and this section. Well, and this probably could be like in a different font or something. Fantasy fiction thrives on its capacity to offer readers an escape from the pressures of the real world. It is a genre that invites us to step into realms where the impossible becomes possible, where the struggles of imagined worlds illuminate the human condition without being mired in the specifics of our own time. However, when authors weave contemporary political issues into their narratives, whether through characters that mirror current leaders, factions that echo modern ideologies, or plots that parallel today's headlines, they risk undermining the very qualities that make fantasy so compelling. The consequences of this trend are multifaceted and deeply damaging to the genre's integrity. Um, Generally speaking, yes, but generally speaking, I think this is true for most stories, most fiction, right? Um, unless you're trying to make like, unless you're trying to make a point specifically, uh, uh about that, mm, present right then and there. If you want something to like kind of like stand the test of time, you want to stay away from current day politics, whatever it may be, just in general. Um, like a modern great like example of this would probably be Batman, right? Batman, the animated series. They specifically tried to stay away from the modern representations of like, political stuff at their time to keep stuff timeless. Um, Great cartoon. Great cartoon. It it kind of shaped that Batman shaped what we think of Batman now and like the subversions of what we think of that Batman. Highly recommend if you haven't seen it already or rewatch it and just, take it in. Harley Quinn came from that version of Batman specifically. But let's get back to it. One of the greatest gifts of fantasy is its ability to provide a respite from the cacophony of real world conflicts. Oh my God. Cacophony of real world conflicts. Yeah. Readers turn to the genre to flee the relentless debates that dominate platforms like X, EU, I call it Twitter, where political arguments often drown out nuance and unity. When a fantasy novel thinly veils, when a fantasy novel thinly veils a critique of specific 2020s political movement, policy, or figures such as a character who resembles a polarizing leader or a plot that mirrors a current culture war, it ceases to be an escape and becomes a lecture. This intrusion shatters the immersion spell that fantasy weaves, transforming a world of wonder into a soapbox for ideology. As Neil Gaiman, a luminary of modern fantasy, has noted, stories you read when you're the right age never quite leave you. You may forget who wrote them or what the story was called. Sometimes you'll forget precisely what happened, but if a story touches you, it will stay with you, haunting the places in your mind that you rarely ever visit. M is for Magic, 2007. Neil Gaiman. I feel like I should know who that is. I really should. I probably should. When stories are laden with contemporary politics, they lose this haunting, timeless quality, becoming instead a transient commentary that fails to linger. For instance, consider a fantasy novel where a kingdom ruler is a clear stand-in for a 21st century politician, complete with rhetoric that echoes today's partisan talking points. Such a narrative might resonate with readers who share the author's views, but for others, it risks feeling like an editorial rather than a story. The joy of stepping into a world like Middle Earth or Westeros lies in its detachment from our immediate reality, allows us to engage with its themes on our own terms. When fantasy becomes a mirror for the present, it betrays its promise of transcendence. Yeah, yeah. Um, and I wish I could say both sides does this, but unfortunately, one side does it a lot more. I mean, yeah, just in general. Hmm. We can see where this is critiqued without saying it out loud. But for the most part, unfortunately, they are kind of right. Um, I mean, for let's see, like home tables, right? Sometimes it's kind of cool to go, oh, let's go. If you're on the left, let's go kill the fash or whatever, right? And it's obvious allegories, or let's go kill the degenerate, mongrels, you know. That could be fun, but if you are really trying to tell like a good storytelling, like you want to veil it. You want a couple more veils and just bring it more generalized, right? Otherwise, it is just for the fun of it, for that kind of escapism, being able to solve the problem right then and there, um, which can be fun in of itself. But it, at one point, like you, we got to think of a better story. If you're like a storyteller, right? If you're writing a book or sub such, uh, and that's actually pervading a lot of like fantasy media right now. Real life politics are inherently ephemeral, tied to specific moments, figures, and cultural contexts that fade with time. A fantasy novel that leans heavily on such themes risks becoming dated as those contexts lose relevance. A story that satirizes a 2020 political movement or a policy might feel urgent today, but a decade later, it could be incomprehensible to new readers who lack the historical context. This transience undermines the genre's potential for longevity, a quality that has defined its greatest works. J.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings, published in the 1950s, remains a cornerstone of fantasy because it avoids the transient political squabbles of its era. Tolkien himself wrote, I cordially dislike allegory in all its manifestations, and always have done so since I grew old and wary enough to detect its presence. I much prefer history, true or feigned, with its varied applicability to the thought and experience of readers. Lord of the Rings forward to the second edition, 1965. Interesting. So, like, even Tolkien, like, the man himself, says as such, right? And if you try to write stories, Tolkien is probably someone you should probably take after. Just, generally speaking, the father of this genre. By grounding his work in historical and mythic echoes, Tolkien ensured that Middle-earth endures as timeless tale, unbarred by the fleeting debates of the mid-20th century. A hypothetical fantasy series that mirrors modern controversies such as debates over climate policies or identity politics might struggle to maintain relevance as those issues evolve or fade. Specifically, of such references risk turning the story into a period piece, accessible only to those familiar with the area's discourse. This is particularly evident in adaptations or revisions of established settings. For example, in the Forgotten Realms setting of Dungeons and Dragons, the Drow, a race of dark elves traditionally depicted as a society dominated by the evil goddess Lolth, have been reimagined in recent years to include entire cities of good aligned Drow who seek peace and harmony. This shift often feels like a response to a modern sensibility rather than an organic evolution of the setting's lore, which was rooted in mythic archetypes of light versus darkness. The abrupt change risked alienating fans who value the Drow's moral complex, tragic nature, replacing it with a narrative that feels driven by contemporary political. Oh my gosh! Let's redo this whole sentence. The abrupt change risks alienating fans who value the Drow's morally complex, tragic nature, replacing it with a narrative that feels driven by contemporary political pressure rather than the world's internal logic. Oh my god, I don't know why that was so hard for me to read. So let's break that down because me stumbling over that might take away from it, right? So value of the Drow's moral complex, tragic nature. So there's complexity within its like narrow-mindedness of like them being evil, loath, you know, um, worshiping people, and then they right replacing it with narrative that feels driven by contemporary politics, political pressure, right? So in modern times, like right now, there there seems to be like this feel that um everyone needs to be nuanced. Everyone has to be like, oh well, there's a good and a bad, right? To, portion of like these characters, like nothing can just be evil, and then the rest of it rather than the world's internal logic. So here's the thing, um that most people don't know. I don't think most people know, uh, is that the Drow actually have a good goddess to follow. If I remember right, it's Elistray. Elistrea? Is that who it is? Um, you might. I would look for the distracted elf. Look them up on the YouTubes. Great lore videos. Um, they go about it. They would probably have something about Illustria, I think, about the good goddess of the drow. And this could work organically, right? Like more and more drow got led by astray to Illustria being the good goddess, um, because word of Dritz, was it Dritz or Drizzt? I think it's Drizzt. Almost certain it's Drizzt. Um, and then hearing about Dritz stuff, and then they go, oh, that could be interesting. That's a way in for, whoops, that could be a way for Elistrea to, worm their way in. Um, right? There's a way for that to organically happen. But if I remember right, didn't D&D just be like, oh no, there's always been like good drow whole ass cities. And everyone's just like, what? Where? When did this happen? Why didn't you tell us anything about this? Yeah, it feels bad, man. Like it just feels like cheap. Very, very cheap. It's just like all of a sudden they win. Like, oh well, okay, cool, I guess. Um, but yeah, that that sentence, that's a sentence right there. And I don't know why it took me so long. And I had such a hard time with it. Anyways, fantasy fiction has a unique ability to unite diverse audiences through shared wonder and universal themes. From book clubs to fan conventions, the genre fosters communities that celebrate its stories across cultural and ideological lines. However, when a real life politics infiltrate fantasy, they invite division, compelling readers to align with or reject the author's apparent stance. A novel cast one faction as a stand-in for a progressive or conservative agenda may alienate readers who hold differing views not because of the story's quality, but because of its political subtext. This polarization is evident in online discussions on platforms like X, where fans of works like Game of Thrones or the Wheel of Time adaptations frequently clash over perceived political agendas. For instance, when a fantasy series introduces themes that echo modern social justice movements or traditionalist counterarguments, it can spark debates that overshadow the narrative itself. Readers who sought to lose themselves in a story find themselves instead dissecting its politics, fracturing the communal joy of fandoms. As oh my gosh, Ursula K. Le Guin observed. Oh my god, is that how you pronounce it? Ursula K. Le Guin observed. The book itself is a curious artifact, not showy in its technological. oh my god. The book itself is a curious artifact, not showy in its technology, but complex and extremely efficient. A really neat little device, compact, often very pleasant to look at and handle, that can last decades, even centuries. It doesn't have to be plugged in, and it can be opened and enjoyed almost anywhere. The Wave of the Mind, 2004. True. We have books that are like centuries old in like some crazy library somewhere. Excuse me. When politics dominate, the book's efficiency as a vessel for shared enjoyment is compromised, replaced by a battleground for ideological disputes. Oh my gosh, I just realized what was happening in the background. Okay, well, I'm going to blame it on that then. Another example of this divisiveness can be seen in Dungeons and Dragons setting Dark Sun, a post-apocalyptic world defined by its harsh desert environment and themes of oppression, including slavery. In recent years, discussions around Dark Sun have been complicated by concerns that its depiction of slavery is offensive, leading to hesitancy to revive or expand the setting. Yet, slavery in Dark Sun serves as a powerful narrative motivator, inspiring heroes to overthrow tyrannical sorcerer kings and fight for freedom. By sidelining such themes to avoid modern sensitivities, the genre risks losing the opportunity to explore profound questions of justice and resistance, which are deeply rooted in historical struggles like abolitionist movements or revolutions against feudal oppression. This sanitization dilutes the setting's impact, prioritizing contemporary political correctness over the storytelling's potential and its historical inspirations. Yeah. Um Dark Sun, yeah, that whole slavery thing. Um yeah. Because the problem also becomes the players, right? The players become very problematic when something like that is introduced into the world. So, yeah, I can see the hesitancy because like people are gonna be like, "Oh, let's play Dark Side," and then it becomes like a huge problem within the player base, right? Just like the Paladins that was discussed earlier with the alignment system, it becomes a problem. Uh, Not necessarily because of the system itself per se, but because of the players. Uh, yeah, the players and the DMs, like in the way it interacts, like you can't expect maturity from people. I think now or even like back then. Perhaps the most insidious effect of contemporary politics and fantasy is the reduction of narrative depth. Real world political issues often manifest as simplistic moral binaries, transforming complex characters into mouthpieces for ideology. A novel that pits good progressives against evil traditionalists, or vice versa, sacrifices the moral ambiguity that makes characters like George R. R. Martin's Tyrion Lannister or Brandon Sanderson's Vin compelling. Such simplicities flatten the nuanced storytelling that defines great fantasy, limiting its ability to explore the gray areas of human experience. For example, a fantasy series that casts a rebellion as a clear allegory for modern political movements risks reducing its characters to stereotypes: the noble activist, the corrupt oppressor, the misguided skeptic. This approach undermines the genre's potential for profound exploration, replacing subtlety with dogma. As Toni Morrison wrote, narrative is radical, creating us at the very moment it is being created. The Source of Self-Regard, 2019. That is a really weird quote. I wonder what the act like the rest of the context of that quote is. When narrative is co-opted by political agendas, it ceases to create anew, instead recycling the tired binaries of our present debates. This issue is starkly illustrated in attempts to impose modern gender inclusivity on established fantasy settings. Hmm, I guess this would be science fantasy. In Warhammer 40,000, the Adeptus Custodes, an elite group of genetically engineered warriors, were traditionally depicted as exclusively male due to the setting's pseudo-historical and biological lore. Recent efforts to introduce female Custodes feel jarring to fans because they disrupt the internal consistency of a world built on rigid mythic archetypes inspired by Roman legions and medieval knighthood. So, from what I remember, the problem with that, with the Custodes, the female Custodes, is that it was just jammed in there. Like, oh, it just happens. Oh, they were always there. Some weird thing like that. When you could probably have made for some sort of like in-game lore, or I'm sorry, in-world lore of that being able to happen in present time. Like, oh, they figured out how to make female custodies. Like, so now we have even more, people for the fight. Like, I wonder, because I'm not part of that uh group of people, like the Warhammer 40K people. But just jamming it in there for the sake of, having female custodies in there was seen as problematic. Even I saw it as problematic, right? Like, don't they have like the Sisterhood of Battle or something like the hot chicks? Doesn't 40K have like cat girls and shit? Like, I remember seeing that somewhere. But yeah, there's like it's not hard. Like I just came up with it just now. It can't be hard to have like in game like it's all sciencey, you know, made up sciencey BS anyway. So it's just like yeah, just come up with some reasons. Oh, we were able to figure out like how to do that. Make a female custodian with such and such gene, and we can now have like the first female custodian, and like you can write some weird progressive books about like her time being like one of the only female because like bro, like they just missed out. Like all they had to do was just figure out some BS way. I wonder how much the Warhammer community would be against like a in world lore way of coming up with that instead of just jamming it in their faces, right? Like because let's be real here, there's nothing worse for the Warhammer 40K community than having boobs jammed in their faces. It has to be all men, as far as I understand it. It's all men. All men. No women do not exist, and they smell, I guess, and rulers. Or I'm sorry, tape measures. Lots of tape measuring. Uh, all jokes aside, let's get back into it. Uh, Also, similarly, in the Witcher universe, the Witchers are exclusively male due to the brutal alchemical trials that only male bodies are said to survive. Introducing female witches, as some adaptations have suggested, risk undermining the setting established rules, which draw from historical notions of gendered roles in warrior castes. These changes, driven by the contemporary political pressure, prioritize external agendas over the integrity of the fictional world, reducing its depth and authenticity. Um, the other thing I have to say about this is that there are in-world ways to do that. I don't know much about The Witcher, um, but if I remember, like yeah, it's alchemic. It's really really rough alchemically, but you can hand wave that like, oh well, we found uh through the main characters, right? Yennefer and what was the other one? Wasn't there some like herbalist lady? There was the witch, and then there was a herbalist lady, and then Siri herself is not just your normal girl, right? Like, and then they could have figured out some weird like in-world reason to have Siri become a witcher, but also like doesn't Siri like have access to like other stuff so she can have like she can be like a witcher in all but name, right? Through weird magics and alchemical stuff like the witcher ing process, like the witchering, like I don't know, but that process is very specific to the witchers. But what if they found a new process that works only on females, right? They have that female cast, right? Like as long as because we don't know this quite yet, because it's saying that it's suggested. So there is they can possibly not mess this up yet. They haven't messed this up yet. There's ways for this to be done properly. Let's all cross our fingers. Let's hope so. So yeah, basically you can go woke and not go broke, but as soon as you stop being, as soon as you make wokeness, as soon as you have like a woke like story and then make it good, it stops being woke. That's the problem. So maybe you can't not go woke and not go broke. Um, because wokeness is inherently bad, right? So either way, if you go progressive, you can you could try to you're more likely to not run into that problem, right? Let's find in-world reasons to be able to do said thing, right? That's progressive, right? That's not necessarily woke. Woke is bad. Progressive is not necessarily bad. It's not always bad. Let's see. Back to it. Likewise, in Dungeons and Dragons, the removal of race-specific class restrictions, such as limiting certain classes to specific races like elves or dwarves, reflect a modern push for inclusivity, but erases the cultural and historic flavor of the game's setting. These restrictions, inspired by mythic archetypes like the elf as a master of arcade magic or the dwarf as a stalwart warrior, gave each race a distinct identity rooted in folklore. By homogenizing access to classes, the game risked losing the rich history-inspired diversity that made its worlds feel alive, replacing it with a one-size-fits-all approach that mirrors modern egalitarian ideals rather than setting internal logic. Um, I'm on the fence about this. I'm gonna be a dirty fence sitter about this because the problem lies in like, especially with classes locked behind uh, races. Like, I like to be a human a lot of the time, and I wanted to play. I don't know. What was it, a blade singer, right? So I had to come up with some weird like way that just it seemed kind of just like you know some way that I had to figure out how would I get this from the elven races, and it became a whole thing, and it was like very bad storytelling. Um, but now you can just be a blade singer, despite being whatever. You could be an orc blade singer, and I think that's kind of neat. Um, and I understand I understand the opposition to that, right? Like, especially with blade singing, that was. very specific, passed down by Elven royalty, right? And it's something very special, right? But the other problem becomes like I think elves started becoming like the only ones with the race restrictions, and that starts feeling bad, right? It feels like favoritism. So I think because of their own creation, a problem of their own creation, D&D had to unrestrict some of these like classes. Um, Now, if they had a restriction on every class, like or like every race, not every race could be everything. I think that that would have been a little bit better. But people complain nowadays a lot. Uh, except for human. I think human in the D&D lore should be allowed to play like everything more or less if you can BS your way through it. Um, but I digress. Like almost every other class shouldn't be right. It would have to be like every race would have like a restriction or maybe two restrictions. Otherwise, it just feels like favoritism. Um, so yeah. Also, hot take, just a digression real quick. Hot take. I think taking out the negatives from race, racial bonuses, I think was a good thing. I'm just gonna put that out there. Um, just in general, but that's just me. Maybe I'm woke and progressive now, or whatever. Anyways, where were we? We'll go back to here. These restrictions inspired by mythic archetypes like the oh no, we read that. By homogenizing access to classes, the game risks losing the rich, history-inspired diversity that made its worlds feel alive, replacing it with a one-side. Oh, right, we read this whole paragraph. Um, we're talking about homogenization. Uh, yes, it's really weird because the usuals that talk about diversity um want to unrestrict uh and have inclusivity, but then with that it becomes homogenized, which is weird because if you have unrelenting inclusivity, it homogenizes things and it becomes like oppressive to cultures having their own thing, uh, which is like the whole diversity problem to begin with. Yeah, the timeless power of historical inspiration, right? Like I feel like this should be a different font and a different like size. The contemporary politics are a poison to fantasy's soul. Historical inspiration is its lifeblood. History offers a vast reservoir of human experience, specifically enough to ground a story in authenticity, yet universal enough to resonate across time. Historical movements such as the fall of Rome, the Renaissance intellectual awakening, or the Mongols' invasions provide archetypes and conflicts that feel lived in and enduring. By drawing on these sources, authors can craft worlds that invite readers to draw their own parallels to the present without being spoon-fed an agenda. J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings is a masterclass in historical inspiration, drawing on Anglo-Saxon mythology, the devastation of World War I, and the decline of pastoral England. Tolkien crafted a world that feels both ancient and immediate. The saga's themes of sacrifice, stewardship, and the corrupting lure of power resonate because they are rooted in historical patterns, not transient politics. Tolkien wrote, the tale grew in the telling until it became a history of the Great War of the Ring and included many glimpses of the yet more ancient history that preceded it. The Lord of the Rings, forward to the second edition, 1965. This famed history, steeped in mythic and historic echoes, ensures Middle Earth's immortality, a tale that speaks to readers across generations. Frank Herbert's Dune is another triumph of historical grounding. Inspired by the dynamics of desert tribes, colonial exploitation, and the religious crusades, Herbert crafted a saga about power, ecology, and destiny. His historical roots elevated it beyond the 1960s political squabbles, making it perennial classic. Herbert noted, the bottom line of the Dune trilogy is beware of heroes. Much better rely on your own judgment and your own mistakes. Dune, afterward by Brian Herbert, 2005. By rooting Dune in historical patterns, Herbert crafted a warning that remains relevant without being tethered to any single moment. Brandon Sanderson's Mistborn series, inspired by the French Revolution and industrial upheavals, explored themes of rebellion and class struggle without mirroring specific modern ideologies. The story of Vid, a street urchin turned revolutionary, resonates because it taps into a universal question of justice and power, grounded in historical echoes. Historical inspiration enables such questions to endure, inviting readers to engage with the story on their own terms. George R. R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire draws heavily on the War of the Roses, a 15th century English civil war marked by rival houses and shifting allegiances. This historic foundation gives Westeros a gritty authenticity, with conflicts that feel both specific and timeless. Martin's characters, flawed, ambitious, immortally complex, thrive because they are not reduced to allegories for modern politics, Martin has remarked. I think that the best fantasy is written in the language of dreams. It is alive as dreams are alive, more real than real, for a moment at least. Blackgate, interview 2001. Ugh, I don't know about that quote. That quote is, that says a whole lot of nothing. I wonder, I don't know, whatever. By anchoring his work in history, let's see. By anchoring his work in history, Martin ensures that Westeros feels alive, a dream that endures beyond the present. Another example is Catherine Kurt's Di- what the heck? Dirini series, which draws on medieval European history, particularly the interplay of church and state in the 11th and 12th centuries. The series, magic-wielding Dirini face persecution. Yeah, magic-wielding Dirini face persecution reminiscent of historical religious conflicts such as the Albigen, Albigensian Crusade. Albigensian Crusade. There we go. Creating a narrative that feels both fantastical and grounded. This historical inspiration allows Kurtz to explore themes of prejudice and power without resorting to modern political parallels, presenting the series' timeless appeal. Preserving the soul of fantasy. Fantasy fiction is a realm of boundless possibility where the human spirit can explore truths unencumbered by the transient noise of contemporary politics. By issuing a real-life political references By eschewing real-life political references and embracing the enduring lessons of history, authors preserve the genre's capacity to unite, inspire, and endure. Let fantasy remain such a guide, a beacon of myth and meaning that illuminates the eternal, not the ephemeral. The genre's greatest works, Tolkien's Middle-earth, Herbert's Arrakis, Tennyson's Scadrial, and Martin's Westeros, Kurt's Gwynedd, Gwynedd endure because they are rooted in the timeless currents of history, not the fleeting quarrels of their authors' times. Fantasy is the purest Fantasy, at its purest, tells such tales, kindling the heart with wonder and hope. By keeping the genre free from the diverseness of real life politics, the divisiveness of real life politics, we ensure it remains a sanctuary for the imagination, a place where, as Lewis envisioned, the deserts of our lives are irrigated with stories that endure. So, it's saying basically that let's just keep modern politics out of fantasy. Um, and hmm, that's more or less true, right? We want to keep modern politics out of most fiction, unless you're trying to make a political statement, right? Um, if you want it to stand the test of time, you don't want to add in modern politics. Um, and modern politics, right now, current modern politics, uh, kind of dilute a lot of different like settings, right? You're because it's not really done very well. For whatever reason, there's so many ways you can do these things really well, but like people that want to, the types of people that would want to put something like that into stories, just say, well, it's like that, get over it. And it becomes a problem. There's so many other things to say, but I want this article to spark how you feel, right? Um, from both the left and the right. Okay? So more the left than the right now, currently, on this day. But it's becoming a problem on the other side too. So I just I really wanted to read this. I want this to be the last. I want this to stick in your mind about like storytelling and modern politics. Okay? But with that being said, this has been my preview of Tales from the Tavern by Elven Maid Inn. Please give them a follow on X, Twitter. I call it Twitter. I will keep calling it Twitter. Um, and when you get a chance, buy this, please. This is so good. I'm really really impressed. Um, and yeah, please give this a read. Go follow them. Follow me on all my socials. You know, I hope everyone had a good time. And I'll be on tomorrow. We're gonna start Grand Blue Fantasy. We're gonna do a Grand Blue Fantasy Relink Fridays from now on. So hope to see you there from 10 to 12 Pacific Standard. Goodbye. I'll see y'all later.